And actually, I think one of the physicians I was talking to today was saying, that's what he likes in it is that patients can self-regulate because he trusts. I think it really depends on where they are in the continuum, but some physicians are not trustworthy, others are.
Mm-hmm.
So it's interesting to see the difference in responses. Because to be honest, it does diverge. Like some physicians are like super critical, it's like control. That's what they at least envision the device doing. And then others are like, oh no, let's passively monitor. Let me make the decision in terms of clinical decisions. So it's interesting. We have a pain physician in the room, so.
Oh,
yeah, do we do full introductions?
I don't think so yet. I think this would be a good opportunity if everyone goes around the room.
Yeah, because so on the Zoom call, I told people 6:30, 6:35.
Okay, so we're about there.
People, yeah, we're right at 6:30, so we have a couple minutes to give everyone an introduction.
Okay.
And I think what we should do is everyone a Marvel fan?
No.
Okay.
That doesn't mean you shouldn't do whatever you were thinking of.
Okay. I was thinking best Marvel Endgame theory.
I have no idea.
No idea.
Too deep.
Okay.
No idea.
I don't even know what that means.
What about Game of Thrones?
Oh.
Oh my gosh.
I think it's divided. I think it's divided in the middle,
Yeah.
right? I would
Well-
say it's split. We have a split.
You could do Marvel, Game of Thrones, or Harry Potter, and frame who you are, or your favorite character, or the game theory, or whatever.
I actually like that a lot. I have the who you are to the favorite character.
Yeah.
I'll do the honors.
All right.
Around the
My
room.
name is Gotham, like Gotham, as you might have heard multiple times. Co-founder of Pillever, and I would say I'm a Gryffindor because no one believes me. But I took the Pottermore test, the official test, and it gave me a Gryffindor.
Oh.
Everyone says I'm a Hufflepuff or Ravenclaw.
Hmm.
I'm a Gryffindor.
Okay.
What is this test?
It just says which
Like
house
a
you're going to be.
personality test or something?
Yeah,
little
it's
bit.
somewhat of a personality.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Go anti-clockwise.
Oh, okay. Excuse me, I got food in my mouth. Does that make me like Ron?
Yeah.
My name is Gay Sullivan. I run a company called CodeWrite Consulting, which does medical billing and coding for small practices. And then I also do some consulting work on coding, and when devices need codes, help people find the code for the device or make it work.
Very relevant.
Gee, guess if you were to choose my favorite character of Harry Potter, it would have to be, oh no, now this is really difficult. I'm gonna say Mrs. Potter, just because she could keep those boys in line.
You mean Mrs. Weasley?
Mrs. Weasley, just because she could keep the boys in line, yeah.
That's true.
Yeah.
Is that Harry's aunt?
His mother.
No,
It's,
it's
Ron's mother.
Ron's
Ron's
mother.
I'm Helen Manich, and I'm both advisor and mentor here. I am a serial entrepreneur who's brought lots of disruptive technologies and actually stuff that you would have heard of. I was part of the team that built MCI in the 1980s, and 2 wireless carriers, including McCaw Cellular in the 1990s. And for somebody who had been part of the team successfully suing AT&T, we actually did get them to write us a check for $20 billion. But I think the more interesting thing of all of that is I was put in charge of the ENF band licenses, and they gave me another $20 billion to spend on licenses. So I refer to it as the largest shopping spree I've ever been on. I worked with over 2,000 startups. I've worked not only in the US, but a lot in the developing world. And I would say that while I'm a brilliant strategist, of the Harry Potter Newt of the Fantastic Beasts.
Yeah.
What I like about him is his curiosity and all of the different animals and all of that sort of creativity, innovation, and imagination around all of the animals, and he manages to get them into the max suitcase. But what I do is work with all of the fellows on the path to the revenue stream, help them really understand their business model, their target audience, prospect like hell, and really get them up that revenue stream and how back in the market is going to take to drive your business.
So you work for now?
I am an advisor and mentor.
Full time?
Well, I do office hours on Thursdays, and I mentor, not only current cohorts but priors. But I also have a renewable energy baseload company that I'm in the process of deploying big projects on debt financing. So that's what I do in my other life.
Mark Carter, I was a mentor for these guys when they first started at Halcyon in cohort 8, as I remember.
True.
I'm a longtime corporate guy by trade, and was in marketing, sales, and business development with primarily with Fortune 500 companies, General Mills, Marriott, and the marketing officer was marketing advisors was now Ameriprise.
Mm-hmm.
More recently, like for the last 5 years, have shifted over into sustainability. I'm currently working with a small sustainability software firm up in the Philadelphia area, Roommate, of course, business to business, and very much like the sustainability work, and for obvious reasons, think it's very not necessary. I'm not so good on the characters, but I guess I'll pick Jon Snow from Game of Thrones.
Okay.
I like you even more, Mark.
It's not because of my hair, obviously, but I'd say kind of a strong but firm type.
I am Ashwin. I was in the same call center Scotland that do. I just recently came on board just helping out a manufacturing farms and helping out with anything else they have. So I've just been here for 2 weeks.
Okay, great.
Hi, I'm Aishu. So I graduated from 2018 from Duke. Gilpin and I kind of met through the biomedical engineering program at Duke. Recently moved to DC, like very new, mid-November, to work in the sales division as an associate for Optum. So basically help sell software to hospitals and large health chains. Heard about Pillever and its mission and what it's doing, was really, really interested. And so Gilpin was like, hey, you should come to this dinner and meet more people and learn more about the company. So here I am. Oh, I also was going to say Newt, but for the sake of not repeating, I guess I'll go with my personal favorite, the OG, Hermione Granger.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, she made it cool
She is.
to be smart. Something that I really appreciated growing up. So.
I'm Elisa Lamas. I'm a legislative associate with Health Group. Got to learn about Pillever through my colleague Jeff Worth, and we're helping them tracking legislative and regulatory issues. My background is in public health. I worked for CDC for a couple of weeks doing state and local health department and occupational safety and health. And my character, with Game of Thrones, I am rereading Harry Potter right now. But for Game of Thrones, I picked Gilly just because she has a strong personality. She stands up for herself. She and Samuel have like a very sweet, funny relationship.
Cameron Saraf. I am a serial entrepreneur, investor, physician. So I've developed a bunch of different products and softwares, sold a bunch of different products and softwares, and went to med school at the same time, became an anesthesiologist and pain management physician, and worked for a little practice in Maryland, which we grew to the largest practice in the state of Maryland and sold to a private equity. And then I left there back in September, August, something like that. Because I wanted more time, so I went to Kaiser, and I'm just kind of hanging out there. Feels like vacation to me because somebody else is running the show. And in terms of characters, I would say I think there's two kinds of people in the world: Batmans and Supermans, and I would be a Batman.
Okay. Great.
Awesome. All right, we'll finish it up. My name is Youssef, like Youssef. Also a co-founder at Pillever. Super excited to have you all. I think this is one of the first, actually the first. And Gotham proposed it, and I think this is super crucial to constantly keep updating you. We always learn that you should shoot for bi-weekly updates, but I think we bother you too much. So I think monthly is great.
Yeah.
And excited to kick things off. In terms of characters, I would say I'm a serious black, because I think Harry Potter, and really because he's an empathetic person, but he also turns into a wolf. And I think that I definitely have a hungry side, but I'm also very empathetic and caring.
Okay.
That's perfect. Okay, so
Yeah, while you enjoy your pastas, we're gonna just start with some updates, and we've divided it up into categories, and mainly it's gonna be just a quick high level update on the team, who we've got on board, who we've grown so far, and then we're gonna dive deeper into biz dev, fundraising, product development, and then next steps.
yeah, and we did want to bring everyone here today over a nice meal because we do have some really big news, especially with the team.
Yeah, so there's a plot twist here, because the main reason why we actually got you is to tell you that Gotham and I are going to be splitting up. Yeah, it's unfortunate, but not to dive deeper into the nuts and bolts, but there was a lot going on, and it was for the best.
We realized that even though we have made something special in the past year and a half, 2 years, that it was just time.
Who's leaving?
Oh, we're just splitting. Yusuf's starting his pro tennis career. April Fools.
Kill her.
Kill me now.
That was cool.
That was cruel. Oh my God.
Cameron's an investor, so I felt really bad for him.
Yeah, they figured it out.
Oh my God.
So I'm very familiar with this day. My brother has been married for 18 years now, and about the third year that he got married, my sister-in-law calls me to live in California. Like, oh, I gotta tell you, I wanted you to be the first to know. I caught your brother cheating on me, and I'm leaving him, and this and that. And I was like crying on the phone.
Oh man.
And then she's like, April Fool, I was over there, I freaking punched you. And every year she did this for like 5 years. And I'm like, all right, I know what's going on.
I'm sorry. I was gonna miss that. Literally in real time.
Yes, sir.
Thanks for that. It's good. It's good. I mean, we need to loosen up. We're all feeling good, right? We're all feeling good.
It's like what Peter Bailey always says. Always imagine the worst things someone could do to you.
No. Okay,
Now that we got that out of the way, we want to start with some good news. I mean, it is good news. So we have one of our newest executives in the room, Cameron. Cameron Saraf. So Cameron's our chief medical officer. He's been providing us with clinical oversight for the last year, even before we got him on board as an executive. And it was pro bono, and we really appreciated that. He put in a lot of time to help us get to where we are. And in fact, the clinic that he was talking about that managed to grow into the largest in Maryland was actually our first customer. So we launched with Kirtane in November, and now that he's no longer with them, it's actually really good. At first, we were a bit scared. They're like, shit.
I remember that day. I remember that day.
But now that he has more time, now he can actually guide us and strategize with us to, eventually going national. So that's really exciting. Second, I believe Colin's with us virtually. If not, we can introduce him later.
Yeah.
He
I
is?
don't think he's on.
Okay, he's not. Well, Colin's our chief pharmaceutical officer. He's a licensed pharmacist based in Boston. We met through Mass Challenge. He also got his MBA from Babson, well-renowned program. And so he has, the secret sauce both on the biz dev side and on the pharmacy side, which was one of our gaps. So essentially, what he's going to help us do is basically get into a mail order pharmacy and to begin to centralize distribution, because we are getting stretched. Cameron and I were talking about this today, and so he's going to hopefully get us to that point where we can actually work with one pharmacy, and eventually we actually want to. Our goal is to own a pharmacy, and that way just centralize the whole process. But that's years into the future. Of course, our interns have been really helpful. So we onboarded 2 social media interns earlier this year, Sammy and Haley. Haley is an intern from Virginia Tech, and Sammy actually goes to Georgetown, so she's really close by. And they're helping on the social media, Instagram, Twitter, and blog posts. So that's been extremely helpful because Gautam and I were, to be honest, we were getting stretched, having to jump in and out of that role. So having them on board is extremely.
We're not the best at Twitter
Mhm.
or Instagram.
I think it is gone, but Trump could have been a good social media intern.
I should have hired him.
Yeah, he's good with Twitter.
And then, of course, we have Ashwin, who's here in the back,
Mhm.
and he's doing us an amazing service where we'll share some of our updates, but he's really playing a critical role in getting our development, creating our bottles, so we can actually fulfill those orders.
In fact, we have almost 20 up in the works right now.
Yeah.
Great.
In the attic. It's turning into a
Yeah.
quasi sweatshop, but
Yeah, it's so hot up there too. One small window.
So on the biz dev side, so many interesting updates. Helen always talks about this prospecting, and I couldn't agree more. Essentially we started with Cure, but we quickly realized we needed to hedge our bets. We needed to ensure that we have enough in the pipeline to roll them through. So starting, from the larger ones, Cameron is a physician at Kaiser. We are in talks, but that's later down the line. Duke Health as well. These are larger hospital systems, but we want to have them in the pipeline so we can have a way to get them later. But the more interesting ones are about to close. One of the largest pain practices in Virginia, Ortho Virginia, ordered about 50 devices. So we're finalizing the terms. So that's really exciting because essentially they are not only a big practice, but they like rolling things out, once it's validated across their 34 clinics. So, we're just working out the kinks right now. Another one, CVCH, it's a pretty big hospital system in Washington State. They see 60,000 patients a year. We've been in talks with their chief medical officer, and we actually finalized the agreement. It's just with their legal team right now. Legal is legal, but that's also helping us better understand our onboarding process. Privacy concerns are super critical. So, business associate agreements have to be signed off, which is something that we were aware of, but we're only learning right now because we're doing it. So that's, hopefully that should close in the next week or so. We're meeting with UVA's Pain Management Center in about 2 weeks. And they're also really interested. So it's probably going to be a smaller pilot because it's managed by one physician, but still, I think having smaller pilots is also important because we can constrain and mitigate some of the risks. And I'll actually be in Boston this weekend, meeting with 4 clinics, one of which is St. Vincent, also Brigham Women's Hospital, and that Massachusetts is something that we've always thought of Massachusetts as a launch pad because we know that it is Western Massachusetts is a hard hit state. We see a lot of opiate overdoses there, so it is something that we definitely want to focus on Massachusetts. So hopefully we'll have some updates on that next week. So what we've begun to realize is that there's really two different markets that we're penetrating. The first one are pain clinics, your day-to-day pain clinics, whether they're pain management centers in hospitals or your standalone pain clinics. And that's, probably the launch pad that we've been focusing on. But what we're also realizing is that contract research organizations, one of which was Seattle Children's and Johns Hopkins, who we're about to work with this June, essentially they're getting a lot of funds and grants from NIDA, from the NIH, to basically uncover new treatments or new devices that could mitigate opioid addiction or the risk of this opioid epidemic. So we actually could get paid to service their trials, which is a huge market, because if you think about it, they pay roughly at least $70K per year on basically people to collect the data on their patients, whether it's calling them every day to uncover trends around their opioid use. So we could do that remotely for a fraction of the cost, a big fraction. So typically we're charging, I think for the Johns Hopkins trial, we charge $10K for the first 2 months, I believe. So it's a fraction of the cost of hiring someone to do it,
and
but
so much more accurate.
So much more accurate. So that's, as we run our go-to-market strategy, the contract research organizations could actually fund us through, because the pain clinics do require, we do have to lose some money in the beginning, but with the contract organizations, they really don't care. All they want is the data. So we could fund our organization by doing that on the side.
Could you give us an example of a contract research organization?
Yes. So Seattle Children's, it is a hospital, of course, but they also have a research organization that is solely focused on clinical trials.
Okay.
And we're talking to one of their lead researchers that actually both met him when he was in Seattle a few weeks ago.
And it's a brilliant way, as you say, to bring in revenue to help fund you up the ramp.
Correct.
It's brilliant.
And Johns Hopkins, so we already signed the contract. They're basically waiting for the grant to come in. So they filed for the phase 2 grant. They're getting a pretty big grant, a $5 million grant. So pretty big one. Hopefully it's a 4-year trial. So if it's successful, we could actually continue to work with them. $5 million is a lot of money. So they could probably spare a few
shekels.
So yeah, he's one of our main advisors, and he's been helping us out a lot as well. So so I guess next slide. So on the revenue model, so Cameron has been helping us a lot with this. So essentially, when we work with new clinics, there is some friction. There's some friction around, how much is the patient going to pay for this, right? Especially for a new device. So what we're quickly realizing is that we need to decrease that friction. So what we discovered is for the first 20 patients, we waive the cost of the device, show them how great we are, and then mark up. So right now we're selling the bottle at $10 per unit. Once Gen 2 is out, we're going to mark it up to 35. At 35, our margins are about 69%, which compared to existing medical device companies like the larger ones like Johnson & Johnson, Medtronic, that's actually on the higher extremity. So if we assume a $10 cost of goods selling for 35, those margins will keep us by year 2 we can actually break even, assuming controlling all other variables. Software, we are working with reimbursement codes that we've been talking about, and that's been really exciting because they just recently got pushed out. We're working with one other company called PainScored, and they're basically doing all the back-end billing for us. So basically, physicians have 2 options. We either do the billing through PainScored, or they take up the portion of that. Some are more cynical than others, where the physician would take on the reimbursements, but some are actually very open to us doing the billing for them because it decreases their time.
On the hardware side, you mentioned Johnson & Johnson, but remember when we were talking, we heard all kinds of stories about all these other startups and smart pill bottles. What's going on there? Are you getting into that?
Yeah. So, really what we're uncovering is a few things. That market is actually very, very focused on B2C. So, and that's why we matter so much. So we have a first mover advantage because we're behind the counter. We're a behind the counter product. We're not selling directly to patients. And one of the key issues there is that they're not really dealing with outcomes. It's more of a novelty. So an example of that is, and they're a really good company. We actually went through Mass Challenge together. Is Pillow Health, large pill dispenser meant for the elderly, and it does help you manage your medications. But they're selling for $500 per unit. The ROI that you have to show an insurance company is at least 10x. So they're saying basically they have to save them 5K per patient, which no pill dispenser can do that. Right? So, by keeping our costs very low, we're no longer cost prohibitive. And also by selling behind the counter, by dealing with pharmacies and providers, and by having providers prescribe, that's also unlocking a lot of value because we're mitigating risks for a provider, right? And we're showing that in our messaging. So our messaging is very targeted to these pain clinics, and I truly believe that target population is what's helping us as well, and the change in the industry. Just recently, Annapolis, actually, the city of Annapolis are suing pharma manufacturers and prescribers, $400 million lawsuit. So that's motivating a lot of the prescribers that prescribe a lot of opioids.
Cameron, when I worked with guys early on and we looked at the data helps the doctors prove that they are not overprescribing or they're managing properly. Is that some of the experience that you all, the data?
The data doesn't prove that you're not overprescribing because you don't know in the general community who's prescribing what. I mean, it gets
I see. So as compared as, yeah.
Yeah, like the DEA knows that in Maryland, everybody's down here and there's one guy spiking up here in terms of the number of oxycontin and things like that. But there's a lot of diversion that physicians are afraid of. So you're right, 120 oxycodons a month, and somebody goes and sells 119 of them, comes back and takes one the day before they come to the clinic, and their urine test is positive, so they're like, all right, you're 120 pills. So when I first met these guys, all the issues that I experienced in 10 years of working is what I told them, hey, this thing needs to do this in order for me to be comfortable and say, I did my job and I'm on.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. So we recently closed our pre-seed round, raised 250K, closed it in November. One of our angel investors, actually Dr. Saraf, and most notably 500 startups as well. So most of the funds are going towards product development, version 2. We took in a lot of insights from the pilot that's currently running, also insights from physicians, and started adapting it both on the hardware side and on the software side. And we got started last month on our seed round. Our aim is to close it by May, June. We already raised 125K and have another 100K committed, both from angels. So that's typically going to be directed towards outsourcing manufacturing. So up in the attic, we that's where we're currently assembling our units, and it's actually very costly because we're 3D printing each unit, and the material cost by itself is $20, and it's not scalable. So we already have contract manufacturers in China. We hired 3 part-time engineers, an industrial designer, an electrical engineer, and a mechanical engineer that have been working on version 2, and they've been amazing so far. We're 85% done, and essentially the next step is to go to Shenzhen and start outsourcing manufacturing. At that point, we're probably going to be starting with 3,000 units, and that's why we're building a big pipeline, so that we can have a way to sell into them and not have to redo, marketing and sales. We essentially have partners that are ready to go.
So, question for you: the business model of getting $35 pill bottle, who's paying for that?
Patient.
Okay.
But once it's validated, essentially. So after the post 20.
And what about Medicaid patients who can't afford to pay for
Yeah, so I think there's two approaches to doing that. The first one is we charge for Medicaid patients, we charge a higher rate on the reimbursement, meaning instead of 20%, instead of a 20% fee of the reimbursement, we charge it a 40% chunk. So there are two revenue streams. So we have CPT codes that physicians
Yeah,
can
but the
reimburse.
bottle still doesn't have a HCPCS code, so.
Yes, but the
So it's
CPT,
the doctor.
so the CPT codes that doctors are getting reimbursed for.
Okay.
We can basically charge.
$1 million for that CPT. Insurance pays whatever they want.
Well,
Yeah.
Medicaid right now is paying the same amount as Medicare, so you're actually getting a good I hate to say this, but you get a decent reimbursement from a Medicaid patient as opposed to from an insurance company, as opposed to a United Healthcare or an Aetna
Correct.
patient.
What I'm saying is you can't raise that price.
Right.
There's a ceiling. Medicare, Medicaid, United Healthcare, everybody has a ceiling price.
So not the chunk of the reimbursement. So right now we take 20% off the reimbursement the physician makes.
Oh, I
Yeah.
see.
Oh, okay.
So we can take 30 or 40%
Okay.
off that to make
Okay.
up for the.
That would
That makes
work.
sense.
That would work for them.
Yep.
Excuse me while I.
No, but it's, and that's why you're here. And essentially, eventually our goal is to get unique billing codes for the device. And we're very bullish on that because I truly believe personally it's just a matter of time until they figure out that this should be a standard for at-risk patients. It's just a matter of being there at the right time when that happens. So we're in deeper due diligence with a few early stage VCs. These VCs typically write check sizes anywhere from $350K to $1 million. So we're running a fundraising process that 500 startups have been really helpful in. It's basically a numbers game. We have about 150, very similar to sales, 150 leads, and just go down that list and just work it. We're getting a lot of no's, but to get the yeses, we need the no's. I think there was a startup that got 100 no's, but then raised a $10 million round because they got 5 yeses, and each yes wrote like a $2 million
Well,
check.
and the thing is as you get your no's, you understand what the who looks like.
Correct.
That is going to say no.
Correct.
Right. And so as you're going through everything, you're able to say, okay, these guys look an awful lot like that. Let's move on to folks who don't look like that.
Correct. So I'm going to San Francisco next week, actually. I have a busy week of traveling. So next week I'll be in San Francisco for a few days, meeting with Unshackled and Plug and Play. Plug and Play have a very interesting strategy where they basically do due diligence on you by teaming you up with their corporate partners. So they have corporate partners in the healthcare industry all across InsurTech, and they bring them, they invite them, you pitch the corporate partner, and if they're interested, they basically will adopt your solution, and then Plug and Play will invest. So we're actually meeting an insurance company. I forgot to mention this, but next week we're meeting an insurance company who basically expressed interest in us through Plug and Play. They're called Tokyo Marine, insurance company based in Tokyo, Japan, one of the largest ones there, but they do a lot of workers' comp in the US.
There is that market.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay,
So that
they
could
would
fit
be-
in.
They
could
would
fit
fit
in.
in. They
That
would
would
fit in
fit
good.
in very well.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Particularly if they would, yeah.
Yeah, that makes a lot of
That
sense.
makes a lot of sense. Because if you've got even one company, insurance company, that's saying that this is working, that they like this idea, that they're, you're starting yourself down their testing program.
And I know that Japan has a growing elderly population. So in the future, it also gives us a pipeline to sell upmarket into adherence potentially as well, and target an untapped market. We know that adherence is very saturated here, but internationally it's not. So if we have a way to also capture a chunk of the international market, of course we need to stay focused, but it's just another pipeline, a way to potentially sell into that in the future.
Well, the thing is that as you get established in here, is that, going into the national health services of the various other developed countries is a much more easy ramp up than what we've had to go through. We have to go through in the United States.
Correct.
But yeah, because, the opioid crisis is not just, limited to the United States.
Yeah, apparently Australia are getting
Yeah.
hit, Canada as well. Basically, countries similar to the US when it comes to regulations and prescription rates.
Yeah. British colonies.
British Columbia.
Well, they tend to self-medicate.
So yeah, I just mentioned that we onboarded 3 part-time engineers, so that's why our burn rate shot up. For the longest time, we've been, I would say, aggressively low when it comes to burn. We haven't been. I would say it's never. I think that it's a balancing act, right? We have to deploy cash in a smart way, and that's what we're doing. So our burn rate has increased to 19K a month, but that's a sprint, meaning that these engineers are on for another month, a month and a half, and then they're off. And they are, quality engineers. Well, one is an MIT grad, the other one is a veteran, has worked 40 plus years in electrical engineering. So after they're gone for this sprint, it will drop down. But not only will it drop down, it'll be more directed towards cost of goods that have clear ROIs, right? So even at this rate, with the current cash in the bank, our runway is almost 13 months. So assuming worst case scenario, we never raise money, we never make sales, we're good for another year. So that's good. It's good.
Great.
For a startup, that's
excellent.
So we project that by the end of the first year of sales, which will probably kick off in the next month, we can make about 150K in ARR. Most of that money will come from the chunk of the CPT code reimbursements because it's month to month. And the company that we're working with, Pain Scored, have already subscription fee. Once we show them that we can make them money month on month, and just tell them, listen, like, we're making X amount of dollars, we have to start charging up front, and then we can upsell them on EHR integration in the future as well. That also could have a price tag where we can tell them, hey, we've been sending you the data integrated through your email or fax, but wouldn't it be great to integrate it directly into your EHR? And we can upsell them on that. So there are a lot of ways where we can increase that. But if we assume that we impact 2,000 patients by the end of year 1 of sales, so next April, that will be our ARR.
How much does Pain Score take?
So right now it's a rev share agreement, so 50-50. So of the reimbursement chunk that we make, we give them 50%, but that's a 3-month trial. It's a pilot. Once that's done, we're probably going to go our own way and just do the reimbursements ourselves. Once we figure out also a billing service that is also cheaper, because technically the reason why we give them a 50% split is that we're paying for the reimbursement services that they're doing in the back end.
Yeah.
But we may realize quickly that we're actually throwing away more money than if we go.
You're paying too much for that.
There you go.
I can tell you that right now.
Okay.
Because I earn for my practices at max 10% of revenues the doctors can grasp.
For billing? 10%. That's very good.
Yeah. And I do it all. Well, I also charge on top of that for a consulting fee for, if you need me to go credential a new doctor, you pay me by the hour for that.
So we can hypothetically work with you.
Hypothetically.
Hypothetically, yeah.
All right, let's dig deeper. I
We'll
guess.
sit down and look at it.
Well,
Let's
solve.
That's how
Can I negotiate 10%?
So let's get to the real exciting stuff over here. So product development, we've got some super exciting news. Is that we're going to have a completely brand new bottle by the end of May. So beginning of June. We've been working on it for the past couple of months, and it looks exactly like this. So we used to have this. This is actually one of the veteran ones that a patient beat up for about a month. Huh? Yeah, we used to have an egg. I should have taken all the
Listen,
pictures.
we have a box.
Oh, I remember the egg.
We have a box of old prototypes, and apparently they, I'm not. People were telling us that they actually look like sex toys, and it was really interesting.
It was a different time. It was 20.
So we've gone a long way. We've gone a long way.
Yeah.
Yeah. Have your little museum.
Yes.
It'll be
Your
have
little
them on a
Cheerio
shelf.
cabinet.
But yeah, so one of the big things is that we try to take as much feedback as possible. So we had this in the hands of patients, and some of the things is like, this looks like a tape measure. It's a little too bulky. Dr. Sarab told us like the capacity is not enough. And so one of the big things that we always wanted to do from the beginning is actually adapt to original orange prescription bottles. So right here is about 180 pills, and this is probably on the max of what someone's going to get. The pharmacist dumps them in the pill just like this, takes our cap, goes like that, just sticks it in, snaps it in, and it's good to go. And then
Brilliant.
exactly. And so yeah, and it looks amazing. I'm gonna definitely pass it around, show and tell over here. And then it's the exact same thing. You go into the phone, you just say dispense pill, gonna dispense that, heard the motor, and there's your pill, just like that. And so we can, I do want to go into a little more on the software because we do want to get some feedback, but I'm also gonna let that slide over. So some of the big features that we're adding in is we have a more robust tamper sensor. So what that means is that if someone's trying to open up the orange bottle, or if someone depresses it or makes any kind of movement on the orange bottle, it's going to reset a simple little button, and we get an alert automatically. So then what this means is that we know exactly when a pharmacist is opening it versus if someone's trying to break it. And then we're also having a dispense sensor. So one of the things that we've also had is like, this is not 100% accurate. It got us to the point that we really needed to, and so we'd have to have patients work with it, where in the app we have a no pill dispense, so then it would reset it. But now this has a more robust sensor right built into it, so an IR sensor, and then you can actually figure out exactly if a pill came out. And then of course, increase capacity by at least double. Longer battery life, it's going to last the whole month, but it's still going to have the charger on there. You can come in. Oh yeah. Oh hi.
Dr. Lee.
Dr. Lee. So we'll do quick introductions. This is Dr. Lee, and so if you don't mind, you could go down the line and just say everyone's name.
Helen Mann.
Mark Carter.
Hi, Sheena.
Elisa.
Cameron, there.
And then you can go. And definitely grab some food in the back. The pasta pomodoro is gluten-free. Everything else is vegetarian. But yeah, so we have that. We have longer battery life, much smaller profile, so it's much easier to carry around. And it's actually a lot cheaper, which is really funny because this should be cheaper than that. But it's going to be, for very small quantities that we're going to start off with, it's probably going to be a little less than $20. But once we get up to a couple thousand, it's already less than $10.
Great.
So, yes, rechargeable. It's going to have an RGB LED, so it's going to flash lights, and we're going to have some cool indicators on that. And so another cool thing, this is just something that we're building that's also built into it, is that it comes in 2 different sizes. So in the sense that because there's 2 different pill bottles that have the exact same diameter, that if you have fewer pills, you can just use a smaller version. But if you really want to expand it, you can just use a bigger clip and then just load it into there.
Or if they're taking hydrocodone, their bigger pills probably fit better in the 16 gram.
Yeah.
So a couple things that we've done in terms of software updates. And so this is all currently on the app right now. So this is iOS and Android. Biggest thing is that we added an informed consent form. And so that's something we want to make sure that people understand what we're doing with their privacy, with their data, because we want to make sure it's as private as possible. We're making sure it's all HIPAA compliant on our database. We're doing really basic integration with PainScore, which handles some of the surveys and questionnaires, as well as OneUp Health, which does the EHR integration. But then, so if you look into this, we have the survey questions over there, key statistics. You can go into more detail on exactly what those pain questions were, and you can always look at them. We want to make the UI nicer, make it more colorful, so then you can visualize those things.
And if I may, on the formed consent, it also helps us sell quicker into pharmacies and clinics, because one thing that we're realizing is that everyone wants to waive their liability, right?
Yeah.
Pharmacy doesn't want to be liable if the patient, like, which is, pretty interesting, but if the patient breaks the device, the pharmacy doesn't want to be liable if they OD, for example, right? But it's interesting because with the current solution, which is, easily accessible, no one's liable. I just think that has allowed us to really think deeper about liability waivers and all that stuff. So it also helps the pharmacy and the clinic.
Exactly. And so what we're really looking forward in the future is that we just started working on a physician portal. So this is going to be an app just for them so they can see all their patients all in one place and they can visualize the data in many different ways. We also want to do some onboarding because we found out from like one of the first patients that they were holding this upside down. And it's like, or just like very simple things like that. So we want to make sure it's very clear how to use the app. Again, we're going to do more integration with Pain Score, just make it more and more robust, and just try to get as much feedback from every kind of user and just implement those. And something that's also really exciting is that we put in provisional patents last year in April. So within a couple weeks, we're actually going to have our full patents in hand. And so that's going to be both design and utility. And so actually it was awesome because we had the foresight that last year we actually had this model, this design where you adapt to an existing pill bottle. And we already wrote that patent, put it in last year, and we're going to get it within a couple weeks.
Wow.
And then, so that's one part of it. But the other part is, I think, is actually even more crazy, which is the entire end-to-end system, where you actually have the prescription pills in a bottle, you keep track of them, but then the physician can actually change the prescription or the prescription in real time and have that update in real time for the patient. And so it's that whole system.
I think that could be more sticky because it's a process, right?
Exactly.
And it's more protectable. I think patents are as good as your ability to protect them. But if we've created a way where I believe we may be increasing compliance because of this system that we've created, the process of taking pills, and Gautam's going to dive deeper into those statistics, but that is much more protectable than I believe our hardware.
So a couple lessons from the field. We'll start off with, we've been tracking, we especially have this one patient who's already on his 4th bottle. And so he's been very long-term, and I text him every once in a while, probably like once every week or two, and he loves the device. Like, he gives us some feedback. I think it's a great idea and hope it takes off and more companies start using it. Have a great day. Enjoy the sunny weather for a change. And so we like to go back and forth a little. And so it's awesome that he's a chronic pain patient. He's been on these pills for a very long time. I don't know exactly how long, but just by using this device, we've been tracking exactly how many pills. He's reducing his pill consumption. And that's an average of 22% reduction over those 3 months. And I think that's really cool, is that this is someone who thought that he would get 90 pills every single month and use all 90 pills, but he's actually decreasing.
I think on that note, what we're realizing is that slowly but surely, starting with 71 first prescription and dropping down to like 60, what that's telling us 2 things, is that we also are decreasing diversion because we know how many pills were prescribed and how many pills were taken. So when the patient goes back, they're going back to the pharmacy to pick up the new prescription. So we're actually taking away drugs on the streets, we're putting it back into the pharmacy, which is what CVS has been trying to do for so long, but they haven't been able to do that because there's no incentive to go back to the pharmacy, because we have a device we're incentivizing to go back to replace it. I think the other thing is we're also allowing physicians to, by the 4th month, if your patient's taking 60 pills versus 90, prescribe 60.
Right.
And that data, which I was talking to a physician today about, he really, really liked that. Because that's what they're trying to do, personalized.
Well, if they were starting with 2, but you're finding patients only taking 1, you can drop it from a double pill.
Exactly.
Which can loop somebody down to a single and still cover the pain.
Correct.
And so we're super excited for this, and so we want to just continue it.
I think what's wonderful about that particular patient and the fact that you've been able to interface over a long period of time to get their information is that the feedback you're getting is that they're still staying in front of their pain, right? Which is, to be able to have a decrease and have that patient still be in front of that pain. That is a big accomplishment.
And then, of course, we also want to share, because after about almost like a 1.5 years, 2 years of customer discovery, we're really understanding and honing in on the motivations between a lot of these key stakeholders. And so physicians, a lot of them, they especially just want security, that essentially when they give these controlled substances to their patients, that they're going to use them correctly. But then on another side, they also do want to make sure that they're doing as much as they can so that they can not necessarily be liable if something happens with the patient, because they are doing as much as they can. And And of course, some physicians are motivated by the reimbursement. Not all.
Everyone's motivated by reimbursement.
Exactly. And of
What makes
course,
the
You
doctor
help,
happy.
you help
There's no reason
validate.
not to be.
That's what makes the doctor happy.
and of course, because they're so time constrained, they need to make it as easy as possible to use and make sure that there's enough educational materials. Insurance wants data-driven solutions and great ROI, and this is a very key factor that's differentiating us from a bunch of other smart pill bottles, is because we're so cheap that we can actually get that 10 times ROI. And other bottles, even if they cost like $50, $100, they can't show that amount of savings.
Because most of our tech is driven by the software,
Right.
Exactly.
right? So we don't have to like latch on electronics and all those extra stuff that decreases at least, I would say, $50. Because if you compare it to an existing alternative, it's probably going to be the same.
Exactly.
Around that same price.
And then at the end of the day, patients, of course, they never come in saying they want to become addicted. They just want to be trusted by their physician, and they want to make sure that they're doing the right thing. So that's what we're trying to design for. So last thing that we do want to share is just like a couple media press things that's been happening in a couple months, just to make sure everyone's aware. So actually last week, was it last week? Last Saturday.
Last Saturday.
I'll share a little clip of this, but Forbes actually put out a video of Yusuf, and it was amazing. So I'll
All
just show
right,
this.
let's go.
Let me see if this. Oh yeah. Okay.
I'm a tennis
being in
player.
America and having to deal with all the things that come with being an immigrant founder just drives you more. When you know that you have a tougher journey ahead, just gives you more stamina and the ability to really prove yourself and to show people who you really are. One of my purposes in life that I've managed to find is redefining and shedding light on a disease that has been stigmatized for too long. I was raised in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia, a city by the Red Sea. So I was raised by the sea. After the age of 14, I went to boarding school. That's really the first time where I felt like I may have had an issue around substance abuse. Over time, it definitely began to take a toll on me, and it kind of hit rock bottom. I received an intervention.
I'll let you guys watch the whole thing, and please share it.
You will send us a clip.
Yes, we will definitely.
Thank
send
you.
it. Yeah. Secret is I beat him in tennis yesterday.
Why do you have to do this to me, man? But it makes up for the do plus.
Yeah. Oh,
This is why you're separated.
yeah.
I don't like taking losses.
Pro tennis group.
I don't know, if my foot starts getting better, I may have to go out, see if I can get out there on the court with you.
Of 2 extra.
Oh, yeah.
All right.
Yeah, and I got 2 extra. I just bought the racket Pete Sampras had a long time ago.
Maybe the next advisory meeting will be on the tennis courts.
There you go.
We actually are trying to invest in a table tennis,
Mhm.
so we could do that. But we also want to share, so actually Yusuf last month was also doing a TED Talk on mental health in Saudi Arabia. Awesome. This is from 500 Startups, one of the top accelerators in San Francisco. And so we were pitching to a bunch of investors. Yusuf also was at the Mobile Marketing Association, just giving a pitch. And then last month I was at South by Southwest for the Student of the Year. And so
We've been teleporting. That's how we've been able
Exactly.
to go.
That's right.
We figured it out. We can give you the code later, but between us.
how do we get the pills in the bottle? So yeah, so a couple things on timeline, and this is definitely in the works of the movement. We're gonna definitely finish up product development. At the end of this month, we're gonna have all the designs completely done. We're gonna see if we can go down to Shenzhen because we're setting up project management, and then we can actually get these manufactured and in our hands by June. And so we're finishing our seed round. Yusuf's on that. He's pretty much there. On board 4 interns. We're really excited because this is our first trial of actually increasing the team. And so it's going to just see how do we, because both me and Yusuf have been working really well because we have very similar shared values, but bringing on new team members, we're going to see how that works out. On board more pain clinics, of course, and finish Game of Thrones.
Oh, it's true. It's coming up. It's coming up.
13 days. 13 more days until it starts. Summer rolls around. We're of course going to focus, especially since we're going to have interns, do as many focus groups as much as we can. Really improve out that user interface and experience. hire as a sales rep, try to expand.
Man,
That's it.
patience,
That's what we're
patience,
gonna do.
patience.
Exactly. Do it as much as possible. And then, of course, winter is coming, and then it's going to bring a new round of product development. We're going to grow the team. We're going to see how we're going to actually expand on a full-time basis, which is going to be super exciting. And then begin establishing mail order pharmacies or regional offices, because we were realizing that there's definitely specific locations where the epidemic is really hitting hard. And so if we can focus on those specific areas and expand there, we can really hit.
And to be honest, we're getting stretched. Like, because right now the process of onboarding is we go to a clinic. Like right now I'm going to Boston, right?
Yeah.
If we onboard like a few there, we're gonna have to onboard pharmacies, and it's just so time intensive. It's just not scalable.
I mentioned this a year ago.
Yeah.
We just weren't there. Right now we are.
Now
We need
they're
to.
specialty pharmacies.
Yeah, that's
Yes.
correct. Correct.
Specialty pharmacies love things like this,
One
and
national
they'll load
pharmacy.
it they'll load the first one and they'll stick it in the mail, and a month later it'll be, you know, in a different kind of place for you.
Yeah.
What we're realizing is we've already spoken to a few, is that they don't like touching controlled. They do controlled, but not category 2,
No,
Mhm.
they're not
which are
going to do it.
opioids. But Cameron apparently has a lead for us, if I'm not mistaken. Yep.
We're great. And one thing I also didn't mention is that there's a potential of other streams in sense of Xanax, because we actually do see that Xanax is a silent epidemic.
Correct.
And so what the awesome thing is, so I might have mentioned this to a couple people, but a couple months ago, I ended up talking to a pharmacist in Columbia, Maryland. Just went upstairs, talked to a random doctor. He doesn't prescribe opioids, but he sees, their clinic sees 200 patients a day. And out of those, 130 have Xanax daily prescriptions.
Oh my
Every
God.
single
Psychiatrist.
psychiatrist, yeah. Yeah, well,
It's not a random guy.
exactly. No, yeah.
Not a dentist.
But in a random, like a small town in Maryland, right? 130 people a day, and he has trouble with 50 of those every single day. I went down to the pharmacy, found out that Xanax is the exact same pill size as oxycodone. So literally tomorrow we could roll this out with Xanax. We just want to make sure we're waiting for the right time,
And it is going
this-
65% year on year.
exactly.
Opioids are decreasing 10% year on year. So eventually, we will have to, whether we like it or not, go into benzos and Adderall as well. Adderall.
Exactly.
There's a new Netflix documentary about, in fact, promoting Adderall use, which I think is interesting. But yeah, so
Well, that
And-
goes to my primary care physician.
Well, I've also been telling you guys that you don't have to limit it to control substances.
correct.
Exactly.
Put blood thinners in it. Every 8 hours, it reminds you to take your blood.
I mean, I think one of the things that was great about using
With
Beta
the
app
hypertension medication.
was that I didn't have to remember what I'd done, right? And I've got that tracking, and it was, and also, you know, when you have surgery, this is not the time for you to figure out how to deal with this. I mean, it just isn't. And, you know, even if you've got a family member there, it's, you know, all of a sudden you're trying to deal with this, even though you thought about it before you have surgery, you don't really have the tools, even with best intentions, of dealing with it. And I can see this, as you're saying, doctor, with all, you know, other types of medications. It doesn't have to be limited to this, but it is about, you know, it's, in many ways, it's less about the pill boxes and about being able to document and knowing what happened.
And then we'll customize surveys on, like, if he needs more psychiatric, we can do more mood and those kinds of questions. And
But
look-
opioids have been a launchpad,
Exactly.
Yeah.
And opiates are in the-
and it's a quicker way into the market. It's a much quicker way into the
In
market.
the long run, though, yeah, definitely opiates is first line. But like when you guys come to Kaiser and you see a patient whose blood pressure just doesn't drop, you know, I got tried every one of these medications. You can say, hey, this thing integrates with your Epic system, and you can see if this patient's taking their blood pressure medication or not.
Yeah.
Because we have a lot of patients who are like,
Yeah.
I literally saw it myself. Some guy looked at the pill bottles and said, this stuff is too big and threw it away. Comes back once a month. All right, this crap is too big. Throws it away. Well, why isn't your freaking blood pressure dropping?
The pills are too big.
Yeah, you wouldn't think of it.
That's
Threw them away
ridiculous.
right in front of you.
That's crazy. And those are the things that we need to try and figure out when people use this bottle. And one thing I actually do want to mention in terms of like why we also want to focus on Xanax is that this misconception on opioid-related deaths is that there's actually a lot of people who are getting hooked on Xanax, trying to find cheaper versions of it, and that's laced with fentanyl, and that's what's killing them. So then when they overdose, it's actually an opioid-related death, even though Xanax was the cause of it.
Correct. It's drug to drug.
Wow, okay.
It's also drug to drug interaction because
Yes.
the physician I was talking to over the phone today told me that basically they don't know what these patients are getting prescribed from the other doctors, so they're coming in and now they're having to worry about. So potentially, if we can get it in both pills, then we can figure out also drug to drug interaction as well.
Yeah, so last thing, we want to also open it up because we do have major gaps in some asks, and we want to make sure that we get those answered.
Yeah, so, we say patients, patients, patients. So introductions to pain clinics, hospitals, or research organizations that have a vested interest in what we're doing. That's one area that we see that we need to focus on as more of an immediate goal. Also, we want to start looking at commercial insurance. Just to begin the conversation again, we actually started with commercial insurance. Remember, Mark?
Yeah.
That was like, but we quickly realized that we're way too small.
Yeah.
We actually went into Care First. The 20th floor executive room, the size of this room probably, and we walk in. I kid you not, like the device was 3D printed.
Yeah,
It was
no electronics. It was
Nothing.
like the supports didn't come up, so it was all rough. And
But that
Was
gave
that
us.
the egg or something else?
no, it's even worse.
It wasn't even but essentially what that allowed us to do is that it was a huge validation because it allowed us to validate that they are looking for something like this, right? They are looking for something. It was just wasn't the right time, and they're actually launching a pitch competition. Winner gets 50K and potentially pilots the solution into either LifeBridge Health, which is a hospital system, or Care First, or both. So we submitted the application last week, waiting for us. So early talks. I think right now is we're getting to a point where if we can re-engage commercial insurance, whether that's Aetna, Care First, but just expanding that pie and just getting more insights around because we know a lot about the hospitals, the pain clinics, the patients, but feel like we need to remind ourselves what insurance companies are looking for as well.
Here's a,
Yeah.
Let me take you back.
Yep.
One other entity we talked about early on, and you mentioned one of them a couple times during the night, is retail pharmacies. Is that still viable for the business model?
In fact, yes. So Walgreens. So is one of the hospitals that we want to work with. St. Agnes in Baltimore. Physician wants to prescribe this. He said the most preferred pharmacy is in-house Walgreens. So I literally spoke to the manager. She was really interested. She had to go back, of course, to her executive team because it is a retail pharmacy. She quickly told me that unfortunately, Pillever doesn't fit into the SOPs, basically the guidelines of dispensing. We asked to dig a bit deeper, so we're waiting on that. But retail pharmacies are, as you know, very centralized. They don't work by themselves. Like they can't just dispense in Pillever and not dispense right nationwide or region-wide. So it's very, very hard to sell into them. Remember, we had a call with CVS's director also very early on, which is a good validation, but they actually groan at Smart Pill. Every time they hear Smart Pill bottles, they groan internally. They don't like the sound of it because essentially they don't have a vested interest in monitoring a patient, right?
Yeah.
What they care about is refills, prescriptions. So the way they measure adherence is actually if a patient goes back and gets a refill. But
they actually hope that the patient loses their pills someplace along the line or goes on or forgets them or
correct.
all
But
the
it's
other
also how
wonderful
they're
things.
using
that
the
they
pharmacies to pull traffic in.
So I believe that for retail, we actually may have to work with mandates. We just have to bank on the fact that government comes in and mandates this. Because at that point, HHS will come knocking on the door and telling if you guys don't distribute this or something similar, you'll get fined. Or I think it could be a public PR stunt. We know that CVS is
are focusing a lot on. Actually, was talking to one of their marketing agents. He was really interested because it falls in line with what they're trying to do in raising awareness. So I think, you know, if they were to distribute 1,000 Believe balls in a pilot, I think it would look good in their press releases.
Well,
So
I think the other thing is that, you know, if you're doing, you know, online / mail order, you know, that they know that they've got the pressure from all those specialty pharmacies and the electronic, it's so easy for doctors now to do the electronic prescriptions that, you know, they have to maintain their relevancy. And so from a marketing perspective, going that route that you said earlier that you're going to go, you know, starts putting pressure on them in not a very long, short run that they better get on board.
Here's one question. I'm just thinking about this. You would probably know. EA has now started to allow online prescriptions for class 2 drugs. That just happened in the last
New York has been doing it for years. Maryland, so I introduced them to Dr. First, which is a company that basically started it's a token system. They put in your
Because I think
password and then you got a
Virginia just allowed it
secondary system.
recently, because there was a discussion I know going on with the EHRs about, have you gotten your specialty, you know, stuff in
So yeah, you
place?
gotta register, you gotta get a secondary token. Either they text message you, or there's an online app on your phone, or there's a little device you push the button, just like high secure companies like Lockheed Martin are going or something like that. You know, your password. Yeah, so we've been doing it in Maryland for about a year. I was one of the pilot people, so about a year and a half ago we started. And I think about a year ago they really rolled it out. In New York, you're not even allowed to write a paper prescription anymore.
Oh, you have to do the
You have to do
electronic.
it electronically.
Well, that's because there were people stealing paper prescriptions. Right?
I think that just started in Maryland.
Electronic?
No, Maryland is,
Not quite.
you can still do paper prescriptions, but electronic is preferred.
Yeah, you still do paper prescriptions in Virginia too.
Yeah, New York, I think it's the only one so
Yeah,
far that I know.
Virginia has just taken opioids off of the mandatory paper prescription where you had to hand in a prescription, you had to walk into a pharmacy. That's just starting to change in Virginia.
One of the weird things is like Maryland has CRISP, which is the opiate prescription database that you log into and see where people got prescriptions from. And New York has it, Virginia has had it for years, Maryland just got it about 2 years ago. They approved, Congress or whatever, Maryland's Senate, whatever it is, they decided on this about 10 years ago, but they never approved funding for it until about 2 years ago. And all it needs is like a little computer. So I spoke with the head of the Maryland CRISP system, which initially didn't interact with like DC or Virginia or Pennsylvania or Delaware. So you can just take your freaking prescription to Virginia. And then we met with a bunch of other people and we said, you know, why is each state spending up their own money when this is a DEA thing? And DEA has enough money, they should just put a database somewhere and nationwide figure out where this stuff is going.
So we
One of the things is this thing can tap into that.
So actually on that line, so yeah, I'd love to reach out sometime later to discuss this because we may have a meeting with the head of the DEA. I met his brother in San Francisco, and he'll be coming here mid-May. So he's going to try to get us into, forget his last name, but
the DA head is
Yeah.
Butum Dillon or something, and that was David Dillon.
yeah. So I think we have to come up with key asks. Just don't know how much the DEA is involved here and how much, how they can assist.
They would need to call the FDA. It's DEA.
They can, yeah.
Can I just ask you, you probably went through this, I'm sorry I'm late, but your main outcomes are adherence, right? Adherence, early prescriptions, right?
Compliant, mostly compliance. So what we saw is actually really interesting from one of our patients. The patient's already on the 4th prescription, so it's sticking, and there was a 22% reduction.
Yeah. Yeah, so, but I mean, even if in terms of just when you're saying compliance, no, you know, sort of
reducing the rate of
Correct.
early refills and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And are you querying the patients, like, are you gonna have the capability to query the patients? So the patients have to say how much pain they're in, right? They have to actually.
Correct. Self-report.
Self-report how much pain they're in. So it makes them stop and think,
Correct.
which is in itself an intervention, really. You know,
Correct.
so,
Yeah.
I mean, we know cognitive behavioral therapy works for pain, right? So in a sense, you're delivering a form of cognitive behavioral therapy.
Yeah.
You know, so one direction would be to, refine that to some degree. Because there are very simple, cognitive behavioral therapy for pain is given in a group setting. It's not a big, long, protracted process. It's, several sessions, 6 or 8 sessions in a group setting. So the principles are fairly, are straightforward, and it wouldn't be that difficult to kind of integrate some of your interrogation of the or what the patient has to report into some kind of CBT format.
Actually, on that note, Doctor, if you don't mind, just quickly giving a summary of your background. So.
I do addiction research.
Oh, okay.
So drug and alcohol abuse research at the NIH intramural program. So I'm interested in psychosocial interventions for addiction, and then also we pilot some drug pharmacotherapeutic targets. And I also do a lot of clinical work at Phoenix House in Virginia, Arlington, Virginia. They might be a resource for you because they're actually one of the rare programs that have a true complete continuum of care. So they start with a 30-day residential inpatient program, and then they go to an IOP, a PHP. Oh God, they go all the way down the line. So, and I don't know if you're going to get into just using this to dispense Suboxone, but the diversion of that is a tremendous problem. So this would be really great within the opiate use disorder community, exclusive of pain. Although a lot of people whom I treat have a lot of pain, it's mostly people who have more primary opiate use disorder, exclusive of pain. But I think there's tremendous therapeutic potential for this. And you've already got the format in terms of just having people stop and think.
So Dr. Lee's research could basically potentially be applied to what we're doing, which is a novelty.
So the other thing is, we had talked before about somehow assessing at the outset of a person's use of this device, some kind of characterization of kind of their capacity for self-monitoring. And then how that changes over time. Because this is going to be successful in some people and not others. So if you can show that there's a certain phenotype who would be particularly helped by this, and then even if you could show that you can improve self-monitoring, that's a huge thing.
And that's a super awesome idea. And so I think we put it a little on the roadmap. So one thing that we're also looking for is that when you were mentioning like therapy, we really want to do that through the app. Our biggest concern is that once we start introducing that, we're a class 2 device for the FDA. And so we're now trying to think of ways that we could introduce the therapy, but through the physician, like it's a physician mediated.
Introducing what becomes cost.
So if we do any kind of therapy within the app, so if we do CBT through the app itself, then
we're a provider, essentially.
Exactly.
We're a provider.
So saying, if let's say they start off with 6 pills a day, and then 3 months later they're at 4 pills a day, and you just give them a thumbs up and say, "Good job, you're down 50%." Is that considered?
That's fine.
I think that's fine. So not psychology is fine.
Because that little thumbs up on Facebook.
Yes.
It could work, but if it's like if it's more formalized, because Pear Therapeutics just came out, they were the first app to go through FDA approval. And so that would make us a class 2 device.
But eventually, at that point, we are talking amongst each other that once we're at that point, FDA approval is nothing, right? Because we're at that point where we have time to spare. We have money to spare as well.
Compared
to where we are.
You have talked to them about the devices now.
Right, exactly.
So they throw it out and said, no, you don't have to get FDA.
Right.
Yes,
So,
we're
one of our main advisors who couldn't attend today is the CEO of Nihon Kohden, which is a large medical device company. He basically led all their FDA stuff. They're heavy, deep tech. And he basically told us, you're good. But what I was trying to say is it's not nothing, but it's where we are right now. It's just simply the FDA cycle is just not doable.
Okay.
But in the future, it may be more digestible. And if it means that we get a bigger piece of the market, or we show better, compliance numbers, or whatever that metric is, then we should consider keep it feasible.
But you can ask therapeutically informed questions, so it's not
That's true.
like you're actually delivering therapy. You're just asking questions, to kind of get at how you want
Yeah.
people to make changes, in that direction. And then the other thing is, how are you assessing function? Like
No.
functional status,
Yeah. So right now it's a very simple question. You might actually see it on here, but it's like, how has your pain affected your general activity? And that's pretty much it. So we do that. We do mood, how your pain feels, and side effects.
And we have an accelerometer in the next rollout,
Exactly.
right?
So yeah, there's an accelerometer. We can definitely record that data and then get at that. We're customizing different surveys. So then we're working with PainSquirt, and so they have a ton of different questions. We can just pull from exactly which ones. And then so I mentioned to everyone the onboarding process. As part of that onboarding process, we want to do some kind of assessment that will say like, how at risk are you in actually developing? Because it's super useful for the physician, super useful for researchers, and super useful for the patient themselves. And so I think that's a big part of the onboarding.
There's a pain risk assessment score. Have you guys
The comp
used it?
or
I don't know what the abbreviation is. It's got like male and female. Have you been sexually abused? Have you or anyone
Oh, is
in
that
your
the-
family been alcoholics or this or that?
Yeah.
So that every pain management practice or anyone who prescribes opiates is required to do that, at least in Maryland. See what the risk of getting addicted is.
Yeah, on the NIDA website, there's a list of screening instruments. It's
Okay.
publicly available. I
Yeah.
can send it to you. It's on and it's basically, it's got it hits these points about, at risk.
The
So we
key
should
question is
integrate that right
Yeah.
into the app.
before they start.
Yeah,
Before
you
they
do-
start.
We
When
can't
they
miss
sign
your
the
whole
informed
point.
consent.
you do between the informed consent
Exactly.
and the first dosing.
And then you put that in the app when you send it to the doctor. You constantly flash that this guy has a risk of 8.
It's smart.
I like that.
There's
Yeah.
also, because there's movement in the field to kind of get away from just the assessment of addiction as being equal to whether someone has a clean or dirty urine. I mean, obviously for these patients, that's not going to be the case, but just, assessing, improvement in addiction by something like a urine.
Yeah.
It's not, so there's a lot of, there are some ways that you can ask questions that get at a person's beliefs about their ability to control their behavior. So, because a lot of people, there'll be people will have sort of a cluster of beliefs about the fact that they can't overcome the stress, therefore they need to, or these feelings overcome them, therefore they need medication to cope, sort of like a lot of negative beliefs about the utility of the drug. And there's positive beliefs where you might feel like, in order to do the things that they like to do, they really need to. So, I mean, it's those kinds of things fall out, sort of people are kind of one or the other. And so that's a good thing. That would be a great way to characterize your population. So then you talk about the negative reinforcement. And,
It's a great idea. Yeah.
So I guess we were to just kind of finalize a
Yeah,
few
we were on the
things.
last
You're rounding out.
Yeah, so legal stuff was being done by Arnold and Porter, but now the 13-month period is gone, so pro bono work has shifted. So we are looking for law firms. So if any one of you has worked with a law firm around town, that
Yeah, what do you need?
so basically, just stuff supporting us when it comes to BA agreements with clinics, looking over some of our contracts with the clinics. So more healthcare related, but also your everyday contracts, employee option pools in the future.
day to day, I guess. So
Let
no
me talk
IP,
with a couple
yeah.
people. Stay away from the big-
Yeah, something, you know, that we can reach out to.
Yeah, because honestly, what we need is mostly boilerplate
Mhm.
and light editing.
Yeah, once the first one's done, you save the template and again and again and again.
Correct,
And again.
that's what we're doing with most.
I have a very good
And then of course we're going to start hiring our first employees. We definitely want to know who do you actually think would actually work well. We want to do some early interviews with you guys, but that's probably going to be a couple months down.
Also tips on what to look for,
Mhm.
you know, certain red flags and, you know, I know there are questionnaires that we can administer that help also understand the personality tests almost. I don't know if that works, but it's like, I guess.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And especially even on our side of being clear with what the job's going to be, especially because we're in the early stages, so many things are up in there that we want to make sure that we have a very clear job description and people are really expecting to take that. Then of course, user feedback. We're going to start rolling out new updates of the app once things get a little more settled, and we'd love to have feedback. So I'm also in the process of possibly making a couple more devices. These are using mini M&Ms. So then just for ease of use, we can send these out to people and then just have you guys use them.
We'll be monitoring your M&M.
Monitoring the M&M intake.
We'll be intervening, but that's, you know, it's part of
Still
the-
reduces pain.
Still reduces pain.
So I mean, we love anything, and that's pretty much it. So
Thank you for coming, guys.
yeah,
Fab.
How many of these things do you guys have?
250.
Can you get a little more?
Oh no.
Prescribe opiates safely is impossible to do. It's going to get you in trouble.
Okay, in
Write
terms of
something
marketing.
Write something like a safer way to prescribe opiates or something.
Okay. I mean, it was like 30
I
bucks.
just haven't
Yeah.
got back yet.
Okay.
Yeah,
It's good
that's
to know.
actually kind of too close to what Pre-Farm has been charged with.
Oh really? Okay.
Exactly.
Yep.
And I
Yeah,
heard-
I was told, I don't know whether I've told you this story, but I was working for a primary care physician here, a fairly large, fairly prominent, primary care physician's office in Fairfax, Virginia. About the time, actually it was at the time that Pharma brought out, Purdue Pharma brought out the drugs. And I can remember sitting in a luncheon that they had bought for the staff and having the rep sit there and say, point blank, these drugs are not addictive. We suggest that you write higher amounts of them. You don't have to worry about it. It's the big, this is the big new thing. Your patients are not going to get addicted.
Have you read the movie or the book Jokes?
Not yet.
Good
It's
book.
on my
You're not
list.
sure.
Yeah, great book.
It basically gives you the history of the development of the opioid crisis from Mount Roanoke, right on up I-81 to Winchester. And not that it's all there, but that's where it goes.
So prescribe opioids safely. If you break it
I
up
would say a safer way
to prescribe, yeah, which is our
Safer
campaign.
Because
Yeah,
prescribing
yeah.
safely, this is what they were saying they
That's a
would
big
do.
statement.
That's a big statement, and that's very close to what they were saying.
No, that's good to know. There's a sale in
So we'll
Mr.
leave the postcards for it.
Will-
You're the shredder, guys.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll do it.
Yeah, great.
Thank you all.
Really very impressive.
And I will put you guys in the ICD-10 code.
Oh yeah, that'd be perfect.